is the Workplace Therapist Show, and I'm your host, Brandon Smith. Of course, this is our at-home edition. And so today, we are going to talk about something that's very relevant for probably everybody listening to this and watching this, and that is, how do you creatively navigate your career in all this? I've had client conversations this week where folks are saying, I thought I knew what my next step was, but now I'm not really sure. What do I do? And I also had conversations with clients saying, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to get back to my job. I'm furloughed or I've been let go, and kind of how do I think about the next step? So I'm super excited to have on the show with me today a guest that I've had on previously, Hallie Crawford. Hallie, how are you?
Very good. Hanging in there. Thank you for having me today. Greatly appreciate it.
I couldn't have, when we were thinking about this topic, Emily and I immediately said, Hallie's got to be the person. Like, I couldn't think of a better person to have on this as an expert to help us kind of guide through this conversation than you. And I don't want to kind of ruin some of the surprise for people, but I know when Emily was talking to you last week, she said, I love that conversation. It was so positive. I mean, there's so many positive things. And I think that's a good spirit for us to kind of take as we're kind of going through this.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's an honor. And we really have been trying, with my organization and my coaches and everything else, we've really been trying to just put as much information out there as possible to help people feel more positive and that we'll all get through this together and everything else. So it's perfect timing to do this. And just so you know, too, I do feel like we've got good news to share in terms of what we've been hearing from our clients. So that's awesome, too.
Yeah, that's great. Well, speaking of good news, I always like to open these shows, which is something a little positive. Like, what's a positive thing that's kind of happened for you over the last week? So I'll start, and then Whitney can go next, and then Hallie, you can kind of close us out with something positive. So awesome. I guess the first thing that comes to mind for me is all of my kiddos are essentially done with school. So that's a positive thing. It's done, except my daughter is upstairs and she is about to take her last AP exam. So this week she's got 5 AP classes she's been taking. So every day this week it's been another AP exam, trying to score high enough so she can get college credit for that. So she's not quite done, but almost done. But that's kind of a positive thing that chapter's closing, and now we're getting ready for the summer and thinking a little bit about that. So that's kind of what's going on in my world. Whitney, how about you?
I'm going to piggyback off what you said, Brandon. I've loved seeing the creativity that the different schools are coming up with, and even like local neighborhoods and subdivisions for the graduates, right? So like Marietta High School, like every senior has like a little pop-up picture that's lining the driveway of the school. I know some neighborhoods have been like having parades, right, where the graduates are in their car and they're going around the neighborhood. Some have even had like drive up ceremonies where the principal's still out there and can hand over the diploma. So that's been fun.
Yeah, that's great. I agree with you completely. I think that's so cool. We've got the track team, because Abby runs track. They put a big picture of her in our front yard for her graduating picture. It was really, really nice. Although our littlest dog, Walter, is petrified of the picture. So like, Walter, it's Abby. And he's like, Rrr. It's like, I think he actually needs glasses. We've been joking about that.
Oh yeah, that would be good.
Hallie, how about you?
So mine is similar, but my child, I have one boy who's 12. And the really awesome positive thing about all of this actually is, number one, I've got to spend, this time with him that we wouldn't have had otherwise, and really gotten to know, especially though, how he learns more effectively. And we had a conversation with his school this week, and they were talking about all of these new things that they've learned about their students and how their students learn, that they're actually going to carry forward into the next year and implement changes as a result. And they're fantastic. So I was just so encouraged by that and excited. And I think, this is part of what we were saying before about it kind of presses on us to force innovation and do something different. So I was thrilled about that.
Yeah, great. And actually pretty perfect segue. So Hallie, I want to talk about careers, but before I do that, just for the listeners that maybe haven't seen you before or heard you before, just give a little bit of background and kind of your business, your coaches, what you all do, and then we can kind of dive into kind of what you're seeing right now.
Sure. So our firm helps people identify their career direction and know what, their dream job is and make that a reality and make it happen. So our first step with our clients is always, what's the right fit for you? And if you're not in the right fit, how can we get you into the right one? And then we'll work with them through their job search to help them secure that job and also be successful in it long term. So my kind of elevator speech, if you will, is I help people find jobs that make them want to jump out of bed in the morning so that we don't have those, Monday morning blues, so to speak. And we work with clients all over the country and all over the world, actually. And so what's been, easier for us, luckily, is we usually have done the majority of our work remotely anyway. So that part for us has been really smooth and knock on wood, pretty easy so far, thankfully.
That's great. So I'd be really curious, what kind of clients have you been seeing recently? Is it folks who are just really unhappy in their jobs, looking for something different? Is it folks that maybe due to all the circumstances are forced into a transition mode and they're trying to find something different? What kind of clients are you seeing right now?
Yeah, and I was excited to get into that. So I was ready for that part of it. So so here's a few good things that we're finding is clients are coming to us, a lot of them, and saying, I am not really sure this is where I want to be long term, even the people, whether they're furloughed or, still employed. So a lot of us are really reevaluating, is this the right fit for me long term? And I think that's part of what's good about now in these kinds of situations is it does really force us to kind of reevaluate and understand our priorities. And are we, does our career align with our values in the way that it should? And do we have the time outside of our jobs that we want to spend with family, et cetera, et cetera? So the other good news is that, not only are people kind of reevaluating and really thinking about this, is that we have found our clients are getting jobs. I know that it's difficult for a lot of people out there, and so I don't want to, downplay that. I get it. But we had a client that got a job just a couple weeks ago, and then I was working with someone this past week on negotiating her, the salary, and she got that job. So, and all the way to we've had clients tell us that sure, their job search may have slowed down a little bit, but that recruiters and employers, they're still contacting them. So I definitely see a lot of kind of positive still going on out there. And even though job searching may be a little bit slower than it was, it's almost kind of like holiday time where it just may kind of ebb and flow a little bit more than it normally does, right?
That's actually a perfect analogy. That's what I think that's spot on. That kind of that holiday period when, end of the year, end of December, moving into January, it still happens, but it's a little more of a delay because people are on a holiday or vacation or whatever it happens to be.
So it's the same.
That's great news.
Kind of idea. And so one client we had, he had an interview with the recruiter and didn't hear anything for 2 weeks. And then all of a sudden, 10 o'clock one night, they reached out and said, hey, they want to interview you next week. So my message is to, just be patient, but still be persistent and don't, take off the gas. Keep, looking for jobs because you just don't know what's out there. And as organizations and companies are adjusting to what's going on, we all want to get back to normal, right? This is what I'm telling people too, including employers. So we're all trying to get back to normal as quickly as possible, the new normal. But so they want to hire people back and, get back into the swing of things. And there was actually another client I was speaking with a few weeks ago who was furloughed, and he got the great news. He actually works at Smoothie King, which happens to be headquartered here. He's in their real estate franchise, works at their headquarters. And they contacted him and said, hey, we think we're going to be able to bring you guys back sooner than we thought. And they, employers want to do this. So I do think that there's a lot of positive going on. We just have to stay patient.
Okay. All right. So I want to dig into this patient, persistent idea.
Yeah.
So what are some things that people can do right now that you've seen work, whether that's looking for a job or just kind of keeping that going? What are some kind of tasks you might recommend, or tactics or approaches?
Yeah. So, one of the things to do is, and I don't want to say it's downtime for everyone, because what I've been finding for clients too is that either they're like slow and they've got time on their hands and they're taking classes or getting a certification or whatever it is to kind of stay busy and engaged, or they're really, really busy. But one of the things that I would suggest first is, where can you kind of just keep your mind engaged and stay challenged and stuff too? Because I think, kids running around, dogs, everything else, we need to have that intellectual stimulation that will help us stay marketable. So LinkedIn Learning is great. There's a website called themuse.com, which is great. Coursera.org. We have a lot of clients that are actually digging back into online and distance learning, and that's becoming more valid as we speak, right? Because that's what we're all doing. So that's one of the things that you can do, is identify some classes you can take. There's also remote volunteering that you can do. We have had clients do that before in the past, and there's a website called volunteermatch.org, and they match people up with in-person, volunteer opportunities. But right now, and even in the past, you could do remote project work for 3 months or whatever it was. And that gives you some experience. It, helps you network with other people. And this one particular client I'm thinking of right now, she did a project for 3 months, and she got a testimonial from the client that she worked for and the group members, as well as the group leader. So there's ways too that we can actually give back to places and people in need during this time too, but also get some experience as well.
So I love that idea. I love the idea of classes, and I actually think that's something I would like to work more into my routine. I teach a lot of classes. I don't take enough classes, and I really need to do more of that. Something I thought you might say, but you didn't, and I'm curious about it.
Well, and there's more, so ask more.
Okay.
Yeah.
Networking.
Yeah.
What are your clients seeing in networking right now? Like, if they're reaching out to people, are people quick to respond, or people like not responding? What should people expect? And then how should they approach that?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and that's one of the other things. And then another one would be updating your resume on LinkedIn for now and later too. So in terms of the networking though, here's what I'm telling people is, still network, because everyone's kind of inclination is to hold back and be like, oh, I don't want to bother people. They're busy. They have a lot going on. But we're telling our clients, still network and reach out to people. You may need to do it, obviously, more on LinkedIn. So leverage your LinkedIn alumni group and reach out to people that way. Leverage LinkedIn groups. This is where I'll be curious to see if LinkedIn groups where people can network with each other that are industry specific, for example, if they're going to get a huge boost. I'm sure that they are. And so this is something that you can work into your daily schedule too, is online networking. So join a couple of LinkedIn groups that are large but also active. And I've had clients in the past network with people that way, even outside of all of this, and establish some really good connections with people who have some great ideas. When they ask a question, you could ask for advice about your job search, for example, and get advice from these other professionals all over the world. And it creates this great sense of camaraderie too, and helps you feel less alone. So ask for their advice, but also network that way. And then just be prepared. 2 things. Number one, people may be slower to respond. So you want to give them a little bit longer window of time to get back with you, but don't hesitate to be persistent about it and reach out. And number 2, as part of that reaching out though, and we're telling this to our clients too when they're applying for jobs, is ask them how you can help them, like right up front. Is there anything I can do for you, especially, during this difficult time, a project I can help you, with, or whatever it is. Like, offer up more of that helping as you go too, and be understanding. So be, I say, a professional pest, so to speak, or a pest, but as long as you're professional, it'll be okay. So flip the words around. It should be a pest if you're a professional. That's totally fine, okay, is the best way to say it.
And that sticks with your theme of patient and persistent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
just do it in the right way, because people are wanting to reach out and help other people too. And some people do have a little bit more time to do that. So keep up the networking, just give people a little bit more leeway and move it to the online platform instead.
Yeah, great. So I've got lots of questions, but I want to make sure that we leave space for folks on Facebook Live to ask questions too. So I'm going to ask another question, and then Whitney, I'm going to kind of turn it over to you to see what questions have popped up.
Awesome.
Okay, gosh, I don't know which one I want to go with next. Okay, I'm going to go with this one. I have two I really like, but I'm going to pick one. So
Okay.
how about what is something that you've seen from a client or advice one of your coaches has provided a client that's a really creative approach? You know, we were talking about how we need to be creative right now and how we think about our career. Mm-hmm. So what might be an example of that? Example of kind of creative thinking or creative approach to creating that next job?
Yeah, so there's so many answers. So I'll try to keep it quick because I'm the same way. I get excited. So update your resume and LinkedIn with, hey, crisis management, and how you turned around your department to work remotely within 4 days. We have to start adding this in about what our relevant experience is and how we can handle these kinds of things as well as remote work. So that's one of the things. Brainstorming alternative career ideas. Plug keywords that are similar or related to what you're doing now, plug them into job boards, and then add the word remotely, for example, to get additional ideas about possible jobs that you could apply for that you didn't know were out there or hadn't thought of. So plug certain keywords in relevant to your strengths, your skill set, your job title now into like glassdoor.com, see what comes up to brainstorm alternative ideas.
Oh, cool. So,
yeah.
Interesting, because you mentioned adding in the word virtually. Just to see, and I think that you're hinting on something that I've seen. There is not one of my client organizations, and we're talking big Fortune 500 all the way down to small nonprofits, that have not made the decision that when they go back to work, it's going to be flexible work schedules.
Right. Right.
I mean, all the HR departments right now are busily writing those policies to allow people to work remotely, and in some cases, full-time remotely. In other cases, partial remote. But the ability to kind of show that you know how to do that, I think, is something I hadn't thought of. That's great. That really makes your LinkedIn kind of feel very relevant and timely.
Yeah, because employers are worried about that. They're worried about employee effectiveness working remotely, because although you and I may be able to do it because part of what we do every day, there are plenty of people out there that don't work well. It's hard for them. And so it's a huge topic. I know some of the big consulting firms are already coming out with, how do I deal with this? And how do I, consult with clients and huge, companies and customers on ensuring their workforce can do this effectively, because not everybody can. So that's a big one too.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I don't want to, but I'm gonna pause and hand it over to Whitney. Whitney, okay. How about some questions? What do you have for us?
Yeah. So we've got some coming in. Jose asks, he's curious on your thoughts of the gig economy and the new normal. So I
think that it's going to be even more. I think it's going to be even more so. And the people that are used to doing that, the gig economy, these short-term gigs, so to speak, in different locations, I think that's going to become even more normal than it has been in the past. And people don't have to worry as much about jumping around as well on their resume, as well as. I was talking with a client this morning about, well, if I'm applying for something that's, not in my same geographic area, do I have to worry about that as much? And a little bit less. We do need to be prepared, obviously, for, interviewing virtually and everything else, but I definitely think it's going to be more common is the bottom line. Great question.
Yeah. Well, you also hit on something really important there too, that while gig economy is going to be something that's become more common, and I'm a big fan of that. I mean, it's kind of my life in many ways. Mm-hmm. You also said something there. If you're applying to something that's not in your geographic area, maybe don't be so scared off from that. I had a call with a client yesterday, and he had turned down an offer because he didn't want to move. He really wants more work-life balance, and he wants to kind of really start growing a family with his fiance, and the job was on the other side of the country. Well, they came back to him 2 weeks later, yesterday, and said, "Okay, we decided we're all going to go virtual." So it was no longer an issue for him. So, I think given those policy changes, don't be so scared off from the geographic constraints, which I wouldn't have thought of.
Yeah, and propose that on your end as well. Is there a way I can do this? So as much as we can, because I know some people are not going to be as comfortable or don't feel as comfortable right now with this gig economy. And gosh, I'm not that kind of person. I want to stay somewhere, in the long run. That doesn't mean that you're going to be forced into it, but try to, work on and be mentally prepared to be a little bit more flexible, even if it's moving around within your own organization. Just try to kind of get into that mental space a little bit more, because I think that will become more common, so that we can kind of get ready for it.
Yeah. Okay. Whitney, do you have another question for us?
I do. It's mine. Is that okay?
Yes, it's okay.
Is that acceptable? Hallie, you were talking about at the beginning of the show who's coming to you currently saying, I'm not sure if I want to stay where I am. I'm curious as to what are those red flags? Like, what did working remotely open up or maybe reveal about some current workplace situations?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question too. So we've actually been doing a lot of webinars and writing articles about, how working remotely can sometimes enhance or strain work relationships. So dealing with someone difficult that was already maybe difficult in the office could get that much worse. Or even if it was an okay relationship, if some of the people that you work with don't deal with the working remotely as well, or maybe they're not as, productive, or uncomfortable and all of that, and just the stress that we're all kind of going through to a certain extent too, can really make things harder. And so the work culture is suffering for a lot of people as well too. Like, okay, if it's not going to be in person that much, or if at all anymore, I don't really like my job, because the only reason I really liked it is because of Joe and Bob down the road, or down the hallway, whatever it was. So that's part of what we're seeing too, is it's kind of peeling back the layers in a lot of ways of what was inherently wrong, but maybe kind of got glossed over by working in person, or being able to, go outside the office to do something else, or whatever it was. So that's what's happening. And then also that, spending more time at home with family and kids, for some of us, we're like, I like this flexibility, and I like certain elements about controlling my own schedule, and we're getting used to that a little bit more. So that's another reason too, that it kind of has forced us to re-identify or think about what our values are at this point. And if we're not getting the meaning that we used to get from going to the office or the team collaboration or whatever it is, then we think, okay, I need to make a shift so that I can do this a little bit more remotely. Does that answer as a start?
It does. I love it.
Yeah, it's a big deal for people. And, at the end of the day, I would rather have people be thinking about this and making sure that, they're on the right track, especially given that, I heard from a client the other day that Georgia Pacific here locally in Atlanta surveyed their employees, and I'm sure there's a lot of companies doing this, about whether they're comfortable coming back to the office, and most people aren't. There's plenty of people that aren't. So, how are they? The workplace is going to change so much, whether it's we're not in person at all, we're only in person half the time, or to eventually, maybe we are there full time, but what are we going to do with all of these office buildings and everything else? It's just a big, big difference. So we have to just kind of patiently see how things play out and make a decision as we go about what the right choice is for us in the long run.
Okay, so Hallie, I want to dive into something that came out in that answer. So I think we can say all businesses are probably looking at diversification differently after this, because they got exposed in ways they didn't anticipate. Mm-hmm. It's like just because they never really thought about a pandemic and how they might change their business model. So I want to take that idea of diversification and I want to apply it to our careers. So how do we think about our careers and creating a more diversified or a little more weatherproof career strategy going forward? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. So thinking about what your kind of transferable skills would be that could go across any industry and across any organization, whether it's in person or remote. So in a way, it's kind of going back to basics a little bit, because people will say, okay, I've been in this job forever, and, my skill set and my expertise is so narrow. But if someone like me or a friend or family member or whatever takes a look at their resume with them for a few minutes and says, well, look, basically you're a project or a program manager. You're just doing it in this particular way. The more we can kind of, I don't want to say simplify it in a bad way, but like kind of simplify it and get back to the basics of what you're doing kind of beyond and outside of all of that inherent expertise, that's where you can start to think about, okay, where can I apply these skills in other ways? And a lot of times, by the way, too, it's going to be those soft skills like relationship building, whether if you're more extroverted and you're just great with connecting with people very quickly, well, how can you apply that in other ways and working remotely as well? So it's going back to looking at what those transferable skills are that can go across all different areas and enhancing and beefing those up and then tailoring your resume and your LinkedIn in those directions a little bit more. So taking out maybe some of the specifics and saying, look, this is how, it's more like skill-based versus expertise-based, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Are there any industries or particular roles that you think are going to be even more viable going forward? Like great ones to kind of look at or pursue because they're likely going to come out stronger after all this?
Yeah, I used the project management kind of example before because I think that is something that's going to be a big deal, especially when we're working remotely, because it's not as easy. You can't just walk down the hall and talk to someone. So someone and people that can understand the big picture of a project or a program and figure out how to plug people in, but do that in a remote way with like, okay, we need to have this kind of Excel spreadsheet or, whatever it is, that organizational kind of management of things, that project management, I think is a really just kind of general skill set that we all need to be thinking about, because especially in a remote setting, I think that can be a lot harder to do. And as part of that, like how to lead the team effectively and build and keep their morale up and motivate people, those kinds of things are different when you're doing it in a remote setting. And they're going to be really important and valuable during this time when we can't, just again, walk down the hall. Does that
makes total sense. That's so smart because all that natural kind of just coffee chat collaboration, you have to more formalize that. This is kind of a geeky way to say it, but I've been saying to a lot of my clients, you have to operationalize a lot of the relational stuff.
Yes.
That would have just naturally happened when you're in the office. Now you're remote, so you got to have to operationalize that stuff. You got to put it in the agenda. You have to kind of make space for it. So people that are really organized and can think about those things and can operationalize it are going to have a leg up. That makes a lot of sense. I hadn't really thought of that, but that's totally makes sense to me.
Yeah, it's a big deal, and not everyone is naturally good at it. And by the way, you can operationalize it, to your point, because a lot of people think, oh gosh, I either have it or I don't. No, you can learn, like, what are the things I need to be saying to people? What are the questions, like you said, put it in the agenda that you always check in and you ask this, what happened to you that was positive today or whatever it is. Talk to people about what's behind their head. Like, you've got all these great books and these, like, why are you wearing that shirt? Like, one of the positive things too is people are getting to know each other better because they're seeing our homes. And so I've heard that from clients too, that they're like, I established a better connection with that, employer that I was interviewing with because we chit-chatted about something that was going on in our home that day. And that's huge. It's a big difference.
That's great. Well, I have a few more questions, but I want to then turn it back over to Whitney to see if any more have popped up.
Mm-hmm.
We have two really good ones.
Okay.
Chi-Chi asked, are some of your clients thinking about being entrepreneurs or starting a business rather than looking for employment during this time?
Yeah, that's a great one. A lot of them are actually. And a lot of them, by the way, are not just thinking about it like, oh, I want to do this right now. But there's a lot of people thinking too about, gosh, I want to have that like as a backup, as a side thing for not just retirement, but that I would keep, even if I got another, let's say, full-time job, I want to have something on the side just in case, because now all of this has happened and I don't, feel as stable in my position, right? So for lots of different reasons, they are thinking about that. And I think, honestly, it's a really smart idea given everything that we're talking about today, because there are so many more things that we can offer up kind of service-wise online, right? And people are going to be more amenable to that. People that in the past were like, no, my, accountant or whatever, I need to be able to go meet with them in person. More of us are going to say, hey, no, it's okay if my bookkeeper is always online. People are just going to be more okay with it and comfortable. So I do think it's a very good idea, regardless of whether you're looking for something full-time in addition to that, so that you have kind of a side gig going on, like we talked about before. And you do just want to think about, like, what are your strengths in terms of being an entrepreneur? How do you feel about your personality type in terms of marketing yourself effectively? And selling your services. Those are usually kind of the touchy things for people, all the way to, hey, if I'm great with operations and I can put all that in place, what do I need to learn a little bit more about in terms of marketing so I get more comfortable with that? So think about your strengths and also any kind of challenges that you might have based on your personality type, and work on, okay, do I need to read a book about that or take a class or whatever it is? So I think it's a great idea, just to make sure that you're going into it with your eyes open.
Yeah. And to that point, interview people that have done it or are doing it, so you can learn from them. I probably have 2 to 3 calls a week, at least the last 2 months, with different people wanting to become an executive coach. And they just want to learn, what was it like to be an executive coach, and how do you build a practice, and, what was my journey in that. And I'm happy to kind of share all my kind of tools and failures around all that. So I think, talk to people who've done it is also helpful.
Absolutely. And that's where the networking comes in. And I do feel like people are more willing to help out, like you said today. And one of the things about that is, when you go conduct an informational interview like that, is you want to make sure you go in with your questions and you're like, okay, these are the 4 things I really want to know, so that you use your time wisely, their time wisely. And then the person that you're interviewing is really going to feel like they're giving you value and great about that time that they gave you too, because you're organized and you're making a good impression. And you never know, maybe they'll hire you for something, or they could pass your name along, or, whatever it is. So, so that's a really good point about the informational interviews too.
So I have more questions, but I think we're getting close on time. So Whitney, you said you had 2 really good ones?
Yes. So I've got one more. Ashley says, I know a lot of people are struggling right now. What advice would you give to those feeling discouraged, who may be struggling to pull themselves up, to take your advice, keep trying, and to be persistent and patient?
That is such a good question, because we know that that's the case for so many people out there. Get support, even if it's kind of remote and virtual. Coffee chats via Zoom, to get that personal connection with friends or family that are positive, and put it into your regular schedule, your routine. We all kind of need that these days since we're working from home. So seek out those 2 people in your life that are just really positive and give great advice, and say, hey, can we, talk every week for 15 minutes or whatever it is, and try to do the video chat too, so that you have that connection. I really want to go back to the LinkedIn groups too, and connecting with fellow professionals in your industry or in a new industry, and asking them for advice and help too. I think that can help you feel less alone. And then turn off the news and watch something that is fun and uplifting and inspiring for you. Check out LinkedIn and posts that have inspirational quotes and that kind of thing too, to help you stay on a good track, and having a regular schedule for self-care. Because I think, I've been feeling this way a little bit in the past week, where it's like, there's kind of a low level of maybe uncertainty and anxiety, which we totally understand. So make sure that you get outside every single day. You play with your dog, your kids, whatever it is. Carve out that time for that self-care, as well as getting the support too. Really, really important.
Hallie, I heard in all that consistency, like just make it like a discipline, like whether it's self-care, not watching the news, having kind of a regular booster shot of positivity from people that you're close to that give you that feeling. So you schedule that every week. I love that kind of idea of structuring your kind of time around that to support you.
Yeah.
Okay, so did have a question that we haven't talked about yet, but I think it's a really good one. I think it's a good one. How about when we land that next job, but now we've got to have to start working virtually?
Yes.
So the onboarding process is going to be virtual.
Yeah.
Any tips you have for kind of the client or the individual who's landed that job? What are some things that they can do that might really set themselves up for success, given they're going to be starting a new job virtually?
Yeah, which can feel really weird, right? Because we're used to, oh, what is my office going to look like and everything else. So we had a client a couple months ago actually be in this exact situation. And she, I think, went to the office, they handed her laptop, and she turned around and went back home. She was like, okay. So one thing is to identify the key people that you really need to get to know and carve out the time, schedule meetings with those key people, have them be video conferences so that you can get to know them, and have some questions prepared about, how are you doing? How are things going? What are the key things that you think I need to know and understand about, getting acclimated to the culture here? Asking more questions and being willing to kind of really listen when you're in the meetings that you're starting to attend to. We've got to listen in a little bit more to, okay, who's saying what? And pay attention to who's who and who has which expertise. Whereas under normal circumstances, we might kind of absorb that naturally. We have to kind of listen out and pay closer attention on meetings, not just to what the agenda is and, kind of tactically what we need to learn, but like who's who in the room, so to speak, as well. So I would get those meetings scheduled with key people and kind of try to establish that camaraderie with them. So you ask a few personal questions as well to get to know them that way. And then when you're on each of your meetings, listen into who's got expertise in certain areas and be sure to ask questions there too, but really kind of do that third level of listening, if you will, to the energy. How are people feeling? What's going on? And offer up your help as much as possible too. Where can I dive in and pitch in? Because we have found too, with some clients starting out, employers are just overwhelmed, and then they're sitting in their office at home and they're like, what do I need to do? So be more proactive. Say, what do I need to do to pitch in? How can I help? Can I offer up my help here and here? So if you try to plug yourself in a little bit more, you're probably going to need to do that, because again, we're all kind of swimming out here trying to figure this out. Does that answer make sense?
I love that. So it's kind of this whole spirit of proactivity. Proactively listen, proactively reach out and offer help, proactively be curious, proactively kind of like try and identify all the players that you need to kind of know. I think that's smart versus sitting back in the past. We might have been able to be a little more passive and those things would just happen.
Yeah.
So you just be really kind of intentional and proactive. And so, maybe make those a kind of a checklist for you as you're going into those first couple of weeks. I think that's great.
Insert yourself more than you would have otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Whitney, are there any more questions on your end before we call it success for the day?
No, we're good. Everyone's, you'll have to go back and read the comments, Hallie. Everyone's really enjoying what you're saying and kind of in the comments encouraging one another. So it's good conversation.
Yeah. I mean, Hallie, even though I'm slightly different space, I'm not necessarily looking for a full-time job because I have my own practice, but I did have a lot of takeaways of things I need to do, including even taking another pass at my LinkedIn profile. I haven't looked at that in a while. How often, so this is my kind of a quick closing question. How often should we be looking at our LinkedIn profile and updating it?
I would say quarterly, honestly, because what if there's an accomplishment that you just had? I know, sorry, putting the pressure on, but
I'm about 4, 5, 6 quarters late.
Me too. It's okay. I need my own coach, believe me, to keep me on track. But yeah, it's ideal to do that because we're all going to be using it that much more for so many reasons. So even if we didn't do it this much in the past, I think we kind of were able to get away with it before. Now and going forward, we got to get on it.
Yeah, Hallie, this is great. So if people want to learn more about you, your firm, where can they go?
They can go to HallieCrawford.com. It's HALLIE Crawford.com, like Halle Berry, Cindy Crawford. I don't look like either of them. That's my running joke, how to pronounce it though. And please feel free. We do a complimentary consultation so that you can learn more about our services, and we're putting a ton of great advice and free information out there on the website as well. So schedule a time to chat with us. We'd be happy to help you.
Well, thanks for your time today. This was really awesome, really insightful. I learned a whole bunch today. And Whitney, thank you for kind of shepherding us for the show today. Really, really appreciate that too. And thank you all for kind of listening and watching today. Hopefully this gave you some tools in your toolkit and left you feeling a little more inspired. So until our next show, have a great week and an awesome life, everybody.